everyone. Thank you for joining us on our brand new show, Make It Short, where we give constructive feedback to filmmakers from all around the world. And joining me today is Toby Falholden. He's a British filmmaker who won the Crystal Bear for his short film, The Balcony, back in 2016. You did this right after Petros had his, and you've met Petros back in the day, right? And you also are working on a new feature film called White Lies. Tell me about that. What's the status of that one right now?
Yeah, it's just come out of development and is on the edge of going into production. So it's been in development with the BFI over the last 18 months, and it's a feature expansion of Balcony, the short.
Right.
So dealing with the same kind of characters, same themes, and hopefully in the next couple of months we start to get some news on financing and shooting it towards the end of this year.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you studied at Columbia, right? And
Yeah.
Tell me about you were in New York.
So I was there, spent 5 long years in the MFA program, officially trained as a director, spent plenty of time writing, wrote a bunch of people's thesis films, stuck around there for a while on and off for over a decade nearly. I was in New York, and it was actually the short film funding on Balcony when the BFI gave support to that brought me back to the UK, and a bit of hopping between. And then the last 3 years I've been back here in London,
right?
Sort of raring to go on feature.
And you're a lecturer as well.
Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of teaching. So the NFTS is a familiar home now.
Nice.
I'm running a few online labs and a few things that short labs we do in person there, both narrative, visual, directing. We do a pretty cool short film lab over 8 weeks. We take like the seed of an idea, flesh it out, first draft, second draft, and then hopefully many of them go out and actually shoot them.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And my dear co-host Diogo Brueggemann, who's a journalist and a film critic in Brazil, and who's basically sort of part of this brainchild of this whole show. This is sort of your idea, and we're now actually making it happen, which I'm really, really happy about. So tell us a bit what you've got in store for us. What are the films that you'd like to talk about today? And then we'll get on with the movies.
Good. Yeah, great to be here as always. This is our 3rd episode, and I'm so happy that we'll be reunited again to talk about movies. And today we decided to talk about we always talk about short films, right? But today we're going to talk about very short films that at most 3 minutes long. So they're really fast. We're going to watch a movie like that in 1 or 2 minutes. But they can have a lot of story inserted into them, and a lot of interesting aspects that we can talk about, much longer than 3 minutes. So I'm really excited to discuss them with you today.
Yeah, I noticed that when we had our Get It Made competition, we the amount of really cool 3-minute scripts we got in for that. So really fantastic ideas, especially when they're geared towards that format. And it's actually a very difficult thing to tell a full narrative in that format. So it's really, really exciting. And I'm actually really excited to hear about what films you have in store for us. What do you got?
Yeah, so the first one that we have here is called Maleficio, which is a 1 minute long film. It's like not even 3 minutes. It's very, very short. And it tells the story about a gay couple that's connected through music, but in a very freaky way. What I loved about the film is that it has so much in just such a short amount of time. We can understand there is a lot of backstory to those characters, and technically it's a very interesting film. The costumes are interesting, the makeup is great, the lights, the camera work, the editing. There's a lot of interesting aspects, and then it's that kind of film that even if it's just 1 minute long, we know that it can be developed into something much bigger. I don't know if the filmmaker has some plans for the film in the future, but I can truly see a feature film in that just minute. And so that's why I selected this film for us to discuss today.
Yeah, Toby, I'd like to get your thoughts on this because it is just 1 minute long, so it's kind of difficult to establish characters per se. You only get so much little time, but then again, you can do quite a bit in just 1 minute. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on Maleficio. Maleficio? It
Yeah,
is
well,
it is
what?
Maleficio.
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 Yeah.
I apologize for butchering that name. Yeah, but I would like to get your thoughts on Maleficio.
I thought it was visually really, really strong. It packs so many choices into just 1 minute, and everything's very deliberate. You can tell the filmmakers thought a lot about the visual construction, the way it moves from just bizarre, very memorable images like the slicing of the fingers with the blood and the blood being connected to the music, the death and violence are sort of associated with whatever's going on. And then the way it kind of just quite seamlessly shifts from passionate music playing into something that is both sexual but also dark and dangerous. And there's some great images, like the moment when it tips into full horror.
Yeah,
there's a great shot that just sort of does this like tracking across through like the slats of the piano or something.
Yeah.
It just hits you, like it's still in my mind. So really, really deliberate.
Very, very visceral filmmaking in this. I completely agree. I think the sound design is spectacular. Like, and that's not a guarantee with short films, especially really short ones. But the sound design is really good. Great choice of music. It's interesting how this small act of violence where he cuts across his fingers immediately draws you in, and you might go, "Oh, what is this? Yeah, I mean, where is this going?" Because it's such an unusual thing to do, like before you start a piano. So it immediately creates this contrast to what you'd normally do. Whereas, you'd see somebody playing the piano, they just sit down and then start playing. But his start is cut across the finger and then play. Because the film is so metaphorical, I think I watched it 5 times, 10 times. I remember I just had it on constant. I was trying to figure out what it was trying to say. So, for example, I didn't know it was about a couple. Like to me, it was about a man trying to experience the power of this piece and figured out that through this blood connection, he could tune into something that's more evil than he thought it was, maybe. But that's where I went with it. I wasn't getting the couple thing. So what do you know more about this backstory of the couple? In fact, I think we should really talk to Noel. Noel, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you very much for letting us watch Maleficio. So what I would love to hear from you is where you got the idea from, what inspired you to make it, and hear more about the background of the story.
Well, it's an interesting story. So I got to kind of rewind a little bit if we're talking about where like the ideas generate and stuff like that. So I'm in a bit of a collective with these 1 minute shorts. So we've sort of made our own web series with it. And it started when this is pre-COVID. I was in Paris and I was looking for, I had this idea for like a sort of a dark Parisian story during the Belle Epoque and things like that. So I went to a bookstore, Shakespeare and Company, and I was just looking for something that was like dark Paris. So like, I was asking the clerk sent me to a certain section, and then this guy he was like, I've overheard what you were saying. So he recommended this book called Medical Muses. Ended up just getting into a conversation, chatted with him. He was like, he was like this cross between, I was explaining him as like this cross between Werner Herzog and Charles Manson as far as a look. And so like, we were just talking, he says, oh, I write scripts, yada, yada. I'm a filmmaker, was what I'm telling him. So he's all, yeah, I just write sort of 1-pagers and things like that. And he gave me his card, and it was Axmodeus. And I'm like, oh, I get what you're doing. It's a great pen name though. But anyway, so flash forward, I'm back home in Sydney, and I'm talking to my colleague, Abel Robinson, and we're like trying to figure out just some content that we can do while we try to work on longer form things. I told him about this guy, and he had sent some, scripts through. And so we're just like, hey, we could do this. So he was like, hey, you want to make them take my blessing? So he had just done a whole bunch of those. And basically when it comes to certain ones, like he'll have ideas, or we'll rewrite, or we'll take something that he's, given us and just do it verbatim. With Maleficio though, to get back to Maleficio, the concept was just of this cursed song, and it was like lovers, but I wanted to make it gay lovers, like in the 1700s. So just sort of rewrote it from that. And it was like, I think for me, the first one with actually no dialogue. So it just came from the fact that like, I like in the collective of 5, which is EPs of us in Sydney, like there's only 3 of us who direct. And for me, with Maleficio, it was like before Maleficio, I had actually done 3 in a row because we go every month. And it was like, it was chosen to do that one because I was like, I'm doing everything right now. I need to do something that's a little bit easier. Nothing's ever easier. And on the day
and famous last words.
I was like, this will be cake. This will be cake. Even if I'm trying to get the piano. But yeah, so we went in and then we did it. And then the edit wasn't as smooth as I thought it was going to be either. But hey, we got there in the end. So 1 minute still takes a year off your life just trying to do 1 minute. So just don't get it twisted. It's more challenging than I ever thought it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I wanted to find out what what your perspective, the song was already chosen, or did you have to figure out which songs you want to choose?
Well, so the way that worked out was
song. It's a piece. It's not a song. My bad.
It's a composition.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I hear that you're a Metallica fan, so I know you know about the composition.
Well, that's someone. Yes.
So the actor Martin Cohen, who plays the main guy, the piano player, we had done another 1 minute short with him months earlier, and we shot it literally in the same location, just with different angles and stuff like that. But on break, like on our breaks and stuff in between time, there was this grand piano in the location, and he would just riff on it. And it was like, damn, dude, you're good. Like, no way. So you're classically trained, yada, yada, yada. So when it came to Maleficio, I just called him directly. I was like, hey, man, I got something that I think you might want to use. And I'm sorry if there's sounds going on over here, but the cat's going to start acting. Anyways,
no problem.
I was like, I would like to put you in this film again. And like we have a rule, like we don't want to like use the same people over and over and over again, but he had the chops on the piano. So long as we're like, we're going to make you look different to the SS agent that you played in the last one.
Okay.
We'll give you the Beethoven hair and all that kind of stuff. We'll like give you the marionette makeup and basically if you're willing, like if we could just play something, and I gave him a brief of a few things and then he just started riffing around and that's what he came with. And I was like, that's it 100%. And then over like the few weeks that we were in pre-production for it, he just tightened it up, made it a little bit more, like gave it a little bit more flair and some pizzazz. And I think by the end of it all, he hated it. So, I think on the day I even hated it, but I love it now because I loved it going into it. And later when you get some distance, I love it again. But yeah, it's like, I never want to hear that song again when you're trying to cut it together. It's like, it's not working.
Do you have any questions for?
Yeah. We were just talking about the film, and the images are so striking. For like 1 minute, you get so much in there. And I just wanted to hear more about those choices of shots, and particularly the decision of like the cutting of the fingers is so visceral and it's such a great hook to get you in. And also that moment when things go full tilt horror and you sort of have that dolly that goes like through the kind of the slats or something. Just the decisions around those, because they were really memorable images. They really grabbed me.
No, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate that. I mean, I suppose I'll start with the finger slashing and things like that. So with, when you think about the cursed piece of music, it was like, well, let's give this a backstory. Like, if this was a ritual, if this was a real piece of music that can bring back the dead, how does it work? So, it was just a thought. It was like, well, maybe you just cut your fingers and start playing on the piano, the notes and stuff like that. And that's sort of like your sacrifice, after digging your dead lover up or whatever.
Right.
Like I think we went into it thinking of it in terms of sort of just a different kind of music video, which is where like the ideas for the shots came from, at least for the musical portion of it. So just going in, we did a recce like, a couple days before shooting. And it was like, can we get this angle? Okay, there's mirrors over here. Oh, there's a TV over there. Okay, so what can we do without having to really move and be as low impact as we can be in this gentleman's house? And then we just knew the angles that we could get. So it's like, okay, let's talk about within what we're trying to do and without crossing lines, what are we able to collect? And it was just, okay, we got a high angle. We could do low angles. We could do front ons. We could do sides. I wanted to get, the feet on the pedals. By doing that too, I noticed that it had this little weird black thing, like you could actually see it. So I wanted to try to get some coverage of that as well. and then it was like we were talking about the reveal of the dead lover once he's coming back, because obviously the idea is like, is that his memory or is he really feeling the love? And it's like the character himself he knows that like hell is at the end of this, but he just wants it back that one more time. So that's sort of the thought process. So when it came to do the reveal and to think about things in 1 minute, it was like, well, how about if he's clean on one end and then we slide on the piano and then he's like sort of evil on the other.
Nice.
I mean, well, no, the monster's there, but like I'm more thinking about like how he's clean, and then on the other end now his eyes are bleeding, because the concept was like beautiful music, but when when the evil comes in, it's this cacophony, it's this harpy, it's this shriek, it's this thing that would sort of make your head explode. It's the exact opposite of like a beautiful piece of music. So the best way that we came up with doing that was literally just trying to do it in a slide and just use a little bit of VFX to bridge the shots. That took forever to get right to start, because we didn't have a dolly for that, because a dolly was too high. Like we had to get it. So we literally had to put it on a towel and just have the camera up and then just try to mark it with tape. And because it was such
you slid the camera on the piano on a towel?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Over
It worked.
and over and over and over again.
My gosh.
So basically, what we realized on the day, and maybe we're idiots for not thinking about it earlier, so we had to slide the first half just halfway. But in the beginning, we were trying to slide it the whole way to try to get it, clean. But it was like, okay, this is not working. So we just go halfway. And then once we know we got half, then we'll start it, get the guy in makeup, and then go the rest of the half, and then just hope for the best in the end. And yeah, that was probably the toughest shot to get.
It's like you made your own homemade slider with a towel. Which is great.
And you got to do what you got to do, right? They say necessity is the mother of all invention. So
absolutely.
I was also curious about maybe that conversation with your cinematographer or the art department, because it was very clear there was a intentionality behind like the aesthetic, the atmosphere, the makeup. You quickly dropped into a world, and you do that like this.
I mean, even to the point where our production designer, she made the sheet music for us. So like Martin, who plays the main character, he had actually, tabulated it out, and she just took it and then made it like this coffee stained, burnt piece of paper type of thing. Like a little bit like, it was a little bit camp in my opinion, but I liked it that way, because it was like this music, in my opinion, I'm like, this piece of music could survive for years. Like we could be hearing a trap version with a sample and do the same type of story. You know what I mean? That was sort of like the thought process behind it. So just like she had brought the candles. I wanted black candles, but we couldn't find black candles in Sydney for odd reasons. So she took regular candles and painted them black, like the Rolling Stones.
God.
Right on. And it was kind of funny too, because when we were like, she was like, but they're bleeding red. I'm like, they're bleeding. They're bleeding. Like their black candles are bleeding. That's what we're gonna do. That's just how we'll justify it.
Diogo, do you have any questions for her?
Well, I have a couple of questions. And first of all, congrats on the film. When I was looking for short films for us to discuss here today, and I found yours, it was a no-brainer, because it's visually striking, very well made. And the story, there's so much story in just 1 minute. So one of my questions is, have ever crossed your mind to make something bigger out of it, like maybe develop it into something else, or like a bigger short film, or even a feature film?
With Maleficio is sort of the basis, like the concept of the cursed song.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, I honestly have thought about it in a grander scheme, but not within the context of a film or something like that, or a longer form short. I'm not against it. I think there's definitely a concept there. I think it'd be like a contemporary horror, but gothic, with gothic sort of vibes. But I haven't actually sat down and thought about it in full, because if I'm honest, with the Aximodeus brand, with all the 1 minutes that we've done, we sort of look at them as all proof of concepts for something that could be longer form. So with Maleficio being like maybe the 15th one we had done, because in the beginning, like, and this one could be like this if it's a feature, and this one could be like that if it's a feature. With Maleficio, it was more, because this came out December of last year, so it was more just like, that would be cool if this was something that survived through the years. But never went much more than that. And just because usually we're chasing our tails, oh, but we got to do freaking January, you know, so you're not really lingering too much on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I have thought about it in my own mind in my own time. And I think that's what it would be. It's something, a Black Swanny, dare I say, you know, something along those lines, but with this piece of music. But I do think that I like the idea that like this music bled into every genre and curse bands, rappers, whatever, you know. But I think that might be too meta though if I went down that route. So, but yeah, no, I've definitely thought about it, but I haven't actually put in effort to write something down.
Okay. Okay, good. And my second question is, well, as a gay man, I always root for the gay couples, you know. So I immediately, like we were discussing it previously with Bernard, and he said the gay aspect was not very clear to him, but it was very obvious to me, you know.
Sure.
And I was, well, my question, my second question would be, have you ever thought about a less tragic ending to the story where maybe the lover comes back to life and they don't end up both dying at the end? So sorry for the spoilers here, guys, but I hope you have already seen the movie when you're watching this. But have you ever thought, have it ever been like on the table, something different in the ending?
With Maleficio, no, I don't think that there can be any happy ending when you're playing this music. What strikes me though, because I'm a gay man, so that's why I wanted to make this story gay, because the original draft was just a man and woman, which is fine. But there was just something about thinking about like in the 1700s, you had to really hide from that kind of stuff. And then working out sort of a backstory in my head, like they were caught, maybe because I feel like the main guy was a nobleman or whatever you would call it, wherever they're from. Because I mean, in my brain, it's like Austria or something, but doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. But yeah, like, and they had to hide it, but then they were caught, and then, you know, like the town or the village or whatever, they sort of killed the lover and then buried him. And then he just he needed to experience the touch, the feelings, the memories once more. So, you know, like I think it's one of those things like, oh, we know about the cursed song. If you really want to use it, then we're going to do it. So that's what it is. It's that longing. It's the longing for it. And I've done work where, like, you know, there's no tragic endings, but in this one, to make them gay, I thought was a better way to serve the story because of the context of they can't be together, and they still can't be together at that time, which sucks.
Sure.
But he was doing anything he could to be back together with him, even if it just, you know, it's almost like Pet Sematary. If you remember Pet Sematary, like you can't bury anything because when it comes back, it's going to come back different. So it's
Well, thank you very, very much for coming on the show to discuss your film. I think we can handily say that that we all really, really enjoyed it, and we're glad that you found it for us, Diogo. I much appreciate it. And I have one last question, then we'll have to move on to the next film. If you could change anything about the film, now that you have some distance from it, what would you do? Like if you could fix something or change something, get rid of something, whatever it is.
The knife slicing the fingers, because I want to do things that are more gory per se, but the thing about it was the makeup artist that we had couldn't make it on the day, so we had to just try to find somebody who was willing to try and do makeup and help and that kind of thing, even to where the point where our production designer was helping with makeup. But we brought on somebody who is a student, and God bless her, and thank you for doing this. But and being the fact that when we got to that shot, we didn't have a lot of time for her to do it because it was going to take her a while because she can't just throw it on. So it was just do whatever you can. So it's not like I'm complaining about it, but if I could change anything, it would just be to spend the time to get the better wrist slit, because just like that every time I said, I was like, man. But you know, I think you know, Scorsese will probably look at a film and be like, man.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, that never bothered me watching it. Yeah, I mean, I am first. The sound design makes up for it just fine, and that's not really something where I went where I thought, oh, you know, that didn't work, you know, and not at all. Like didn't think about it at all. So while you might feel reluctant about it, that's definitely not one of them from my perspective. I don't know.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate that.
It pulls you in. It does what it wants to do, and you're immediately trying to understand did he just do that? And now he's going to play the piano, and it does its work really well.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. And I know the hour is late or early, whatever you want to call it. So I appreciate you coming in and let us talk about your film.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, gentlemen.
Well, that was really cool. I really liked that film. Like, and he's a really compelling character. Like, I honestly couldn't really sort of decide where he sort of came from, because clearly has a very pragmatic perspective on filmmaking. It's like, no, we did this, we did that, which feels very director to me. Like just being a director sort of forces you to be pragmatic just to get these things across, rather than talking about the bigger ideas, which is more writer, which is a bit more that. So clearly on that front, I don't know, what did you think about that? Because I know you were fishing for the ideas a little bit.
Yeah, I got that sense when he talked about it being a music video. I think he accomplishes that.
I agree.
And maybe that's set up with story and understand the context a bit more, perhaps the space in which clarification could have come in. But I think he did pretty well for 1 minute to be able to get across both the intimacy and then turn it to darkness. And I don't think he was, even though it's clear he has all these ideas about the setup and the backstory and the curse and the ritual, I think he was just probably going for something that's very visceral. Like you just get potent imagery and you remember them, and they linger in your mind.
But I think if you have 1 minute, that's all you can really do, right? You have to aim for the visceral nature of the story that you can tell. I mean, this is what commercials have to do and music videos have to do. It's just aim for that. I don't know. What did you think in terms of the length of it? I mean, I know you were angling for a longer film because there's room there for that. Do you think he could have gone longer and still make it work?
Well, I think so. I think it could have been longer, but I also, love that it's just 1 minute. I don't have any complaints about being short. At the same time, that I want more. I think that it's so good that I want to see more. That kind of feeling that I have right now, and I had the first time I watched it, because we see, as Noel said, there's a lot of backstory. He did a lot of, he imagined a whole situation. And I would really love to see it exploring much more of those characters, if you could.
And I'm glad you pointed out the whole thing with that I didn't quite get the gay element of it, because I really didn't spot that. Like I was looking at it just straight on screen, and so when you said, I'm glad you pointed it out, because I was gonna, I was gonna point it out in a bit. So I'm glad you did.
I think it's because it moves so fast that it's easy to almost miss the moment of just like intimacy before it goes horror.
I mean,
so I had the same thing where it was only when I read the description about like bringing back a lover, I was like, oh, okay, like I didn't immediately catch it. So but he's doing so much with so little time. It's the kind of thing where if you had an extra minute when he was speaking about the backstory, that was really interesting. You almost wanted to catch a bit more of the setup to understand that this is the ritual element, and he's bringing back someone that he cared about, and you would have got it more if you just had probably a bit more time. So
I agree. So what's up next for us? What's the next film we're going to talk about?
Well, now we have a drama called Tuesday, which is a 3-minute long short film, and it's a film about real life events. So the focus of the film here is the 9/11 attacks in New York City in the US in 2001. And we go back in time here and we watch a family dealing with that situation. And what's interesting is that both the story is very compelling, because we all, I don't know, if we're old enough, we all have been through that moment when we watched on TV the attacks on the Twin Towers. And this time we have a family that has someone involved in the attacks, which is really dramatic in every way possible. And technically, it's a very interesting film as well, because they chose to have it in just one continuous take. So from start to finish, we are following those characters dealing with that dramatic situation. So I had no option other than bringing it here for us to discuss.
Yeah, I want to speak to you about this, Toby, actually, because 9/11, were you in New York during that time?
Before my time.
Was that before yours? Okay,
yeah,
so when did you go to New York?
But I still do remember very viscerally, as everyone does.
I
went there in 2008.
2008, right. Okay.
In the midst of the financial crisis.
Oh, so the other life-changing event in the early 2000s. Yeah, I mean, I remember 9/11 very differently because I was at university in Texas. So for me, it happened, and I was in the library studying for an exam that was going to happen later that day, last minute cramming. So I was, and of course, this is 2001. This is no smartphones, no internet everywhere. So I was completely insulated, and I didn't find out till all the classes were canceled, and I got home and I switched on the TV, and then that's what happened. So I had a very, very delayed reaction. But then my next day, I had political science as my very, very first class. And of course, there was nothing to discuss other than 9/11, and certainly experiencing the visceral reactions of people 24 hours after the event is quite an incredible sort of thing to go through. I was 21 at that time. What did you think of the director's choices to basically go down the road of finding an everyday life moment that couldn't be anything else? Like, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the film.
Yeah, I think as a setup, it's a really smart way to ground the film and connect you to the impact of the loss through briefly giving access and a window into the lives of these people, and the way it brings you to the fact that this woman is pregnant as she stands up and moves through the apartment, that there's the sense of warmth and connectedness with mom and dad, and the way we look over to mom and she's busy doing the quilt, or like it's for the baby. So it's layering up the love that exists within that family unit, and then hits you with the reality of that phone call. And it was interesting to do it all in this one continuous take. I guess it was like a drone shot or something.
No, it was a gimbal.
So it was a gimbal,
big,
so
big gimbal.
Very smooth. And it was an interesting choice. If we had the filmmaker, I'd be curious to ask them about that. I think it both helped and maybe sometimes worked against the film. But it definitely emphasizes the flowing connectedness of everybody in that space.
The real-time nature of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is happening now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to like with some kind of delayed time or something.
But often when we're using those kind of one takes, we're doing it in part to put emphasis on, like, we know something's about to happen, and then we keep in that continuous take in order to be on the edge of our seat in anticipation of when does it land. But in this film, we don't quite know what we're watching until it reveals itself. So there were moments where I wondered, would it work better if it was just
if we knew about it before?
Either to play something at the beginning that told us that today is the day. Yeah. Otherwise, it could have been cut up maybe, but it's I think a bold choice, and it creates an elegance to the sort of the way it flows and unfolds, and the way everybody's moving around, the way the brother comes in and talks to dad and to mum.
Yeah, I agree. I think the obviously there's the suspense philosophy, right? Where Hitchcock said it really nicely. You either startle people, and when you don't tell people what's hiding under the table, or you tell people what's hiding under the table and make people on the edge of their seat to wait what's going to happen.
Surprise versus suspense.
Exactly. And he went for the surprise. Which is a perfectly fine way to do it, especially because he tried to explore sort of the mundane, everyday nature of just people having a day, like woman's putting together a crib, the mother's making a quilt, that kind of thing. So the everyday life of this family, and that gets the first sort of hint of an interruption you get is when the brother comes in and says, "Hey, have you seen what's on TV?" And that's sort of happening in the background a little bit. It's not in your face yet. It's just something's happening in New York, and that's it. And then the first real escalation of tension you get is when she picks up the phone. Yeah. And by that point, you kind of get the sense, like, I mean, I didn't know what it was about when I first watched it. But I had a feeling, because of the mundane nature of it, that it was about 9/11. You know what I mean? And I don't know why my mind went there. I didn't know that's what it was going to do, but I had a feeling that was going to be the case, just because of this kind of everyday nature thing. It felt very real to me, I really loved some of the performances more than others, but generally speaking, I thought he pulled off the sort of everyday slice of life nature fairly well. I think there's a few things he could have done to tweak that a little bit more, to reduce the some of the lines felt forced in a couple of places, but I think that's more of a performance thing than it was a writing thing. I think on the writing part, that worked fairly well. At least that's where sort of I stood. And I think the reveal at the end felt very well. But I completely agree with you. It could have been very interesting to know beforehand that this is something's happening in New York, and then wonder how's this family connected to it.
Yeah, and that's that challenge, isn't it? I think the filmmaker wants the surprise, but then to take that form of filmmaking in that continuous take makes me wonder about, would it help to have known a little more that we're watching this film on the day of 9/11, or just something setting us up a little bit? But it's still impactful. You still feel it, and that's that moment of sort of pulling back and revealing the whole family as she's been the one that was the last to speak on the phone. You know, it works in its intention to
completely
hit you with something that is now devastating. And we spent all of those moments up till that, where everybody's in the process of building. She's building the crib, quilt's being built, and then destruction.
Yeah.
I like this use of sort of off-screen tension at the end, that you don't see what the family is looking at. I think I also wondered, what would it have been like in the background to have some kind of a mirror that's not necessarily watching the TV, but maybe seeing more of the family and playing with the idea that while she's on the phone grasping this, we're visually starting to recognize very clearly what this is. But I think at the same time, the filmmaker knows that we all know those images, and is letting us just imagine the horror of what's being seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, very clever use of off-screen space, I think, and simply bringing us into that. I'd like to hear more from you on that, because obviously, I mean, both of us at least spent a significant amount of time in the US living sort of among Americans, you especially in New York. But I'd like to hear sort of your perspective on it, having living in Brazil and obviously having experienced it a bit differently than how Americans would have experienced. So what was your sort of first take on that film coming into it?
Yeah, well, first of all, my experience with 9/11 is quite different as well. Well, I was very young. I was only 13 at the time. So, it's something that you don't take very seriously. Of course, it's something serious, but you're just, a teenager. So you don't know how that will affect the planet that you live in for the next decades, that, and still nowadays probably affecting the lives of millions of people in the planet. And that, only with years that I really realized how that event changed the history of the planet. And watching the film, it took me back, because I was a kid, watching TV. I was watching cartoons, in Brazil, and then suddenly they stopped everything to show live what was happening. And then, and I think in that situation that I could really identify myself with some of the characters of the movie. Of course, with the wife having the husband on the plane, that was really something that surprised me. And I Googled it to see if that really happened. And unfortunately, Christian Fescine, who is the director of the movie, could not be here with us today to discuss his film. But and to tell us what inspired him to tell this story. But I Googled and I found out that there were people calling home from planes at the time, and I didn't know that until I watched it Tuesday, and I felt really touched by his film even more, because it could be based on a real life story, or maybe on an article that he read about a family that lost someone on that day. So yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I had the thing is, I knew about the phone calls. Like that was something that I've been aware of pretty much from the get go. That was a big part that actually, if you haven't seen the movie, I recommend watching United 93 by Paul Greengrass, where the whole calling from the satellite phone from the airplane, actually a big plot point. It's a very, very important part. It's a genuinely great film, but I mean, it's gut wrenching. It's a very, I haven't seen it again. It's one of those films that watching it once is enough, and I recommend you, if you haven't watched it, I recommend you do. It is really, really good. Obviously, United 93 is an action doc, I guess. You know,
It's
it's trying exactly. It's a thriller in many ways, but what I like about this is that it just took the exact opposite direction and said, no, we are going to show just life as it was and how much this one event suddenly changed this family's life. You know, they had all these plans, they had all these things they were going to do, and suddenly all of that is going to be different, you know, in an instant moment.
It reminded me a bit of the approach of this the short film that recently won the Oscar with Riz Ahmed.
Right, yes, we saw that. Yeah.
We get that intimacy of the family unit. It's all sort of everyday, it could be any family, and then suddenly this massacre takes place, and it just collides these two worlds together. It felt reminiscent of that. And, I agree with you about. I wonder if the Paul Greengrass movie inspired this one as well as a story to tell.
I mean, certainly, I think it's the. I mean, Paul. I think to date, the Paul Greengrass's film is certainly the best film made about 9/11 so far. Certainly on a feature film level, because others have tried and have made a film about like what happened at the events or something like that. But I feel like his definitely had the most emotional heart and felt the most real, you know, and felt the least glorifying or, you know, turning into like heroes or anything like that. It simply showed regular people making tough decisions in a crazy time, you know, and I think that's where it's also where Paul Greengrass shines very hard. But in this case, I think if we take this film, I think it only has two minor weaknesses. The rest of it, it works so well with almost everything. I think I agree with you that I think there were moments where the Steadicam, where the choice to be on a Steadicam continuously was limited by its space and took you out of it because you're like, oh, I'm watching a Steadicam shot. You know what I mean? So it took you out of that moment. And this is the constant conundrum with one take moments anyway, because suddenly the shot makes it aware of itself, you know. I think there were moments when it did that, you know, when it did that too much. For example, the first moment that I noticed, which I love, the very subtle opening of the film where, you know, we just have a simple track back of her, you know, fixing the cot but then the moment she gets up, it's this big swoop in, you know, and that made me extremely aware of the fact that we're now on a gimbal for the rest of it. And granted, director's brain doing the job here, but I was extremely aware of the shot after that, you know, whereas a simple jib up would have drawn much less attention to itself rather than this crazy swoop in. And then we're constantly swooping around. Like, I feel like even though all the movements were perfectly motivated by everything there, I felt there were times when the movement was just a bit too much.
I agree. And also when you have a moment where the camera moves with that force at the beginning, it slightly dilutes the impact of when the camera is moving later on.
Exactly.
Like on the impact of that phone call. I think there's this thing a little bit to do with whose perspective are we in? So I don't know that this is right or wrong, but I wondered what would it have been like to have stayed more with her when the brother comes in and walks past her.
I
So
agree.
we still see the activity of the family and it's emphasized, but we're with her and it's like, you know, maybe the emphasis on the baby's kicking or something like this, and we're staying present with
I would
her
have stayed on her
experience
as well.
and then come back to the family. Maybe that was the one moment which threw me, and it felt like the choice to stay on the Steadicam was what was making that commitment to needing to move with whoever was moving around.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would have stayed on her as well, and told the whole story from her perspective. And this is one of the things as a good inspiration for, you know, motivated camera movement. David Fincher's brilliant at it. Like if you want to have show-offy shots that are still motivated by movement and that forced perspective and that kind of thing, David Fincher is a great designer of shots for these kinds of things.
You've reminded me, there's one thing that I really thought was a smart move, which is when the second plane impacts, camera wobbles.
That's right. That's a very smart decision.
That was a clever choice. We feel the impact of what everyone else in the room has just gone through. It's not. It's subjective. It's psychological in that choice. I thought that was a really clever decision.
I agree. Now, I think the for me, like when the film really sort of hits is when the camera starts resting and simply stays on her in the kitchen as she's on the phone, you know, and simply that we start feeling the moment with her, and because we were with the brother, and then we pan over to the mother, and then we come back to her. Do you know what I mean? Like I get why those things were there, but I don't think we needed that. We needed her perspective. That's what we were introduced to, and that's what we should have stayed with. Even if we wanted to see the mother and stuff like that, I think that could have even enhanced it even more and would have helped with the language of the film that it was trying to tell. So I really, really like that in general, but I think less would have been more here, when it comes to the camera movement.
Yeah, agreed.
Any last thoughts on Tuesday, Diogo?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very well-made film overall. Overall, I agree with you guys on your points about the camera movements, some of the casting choices as well. But overall, I really liked it, and I kept thinking about it for a long time after I finished it. And I think this is one of the objectives when you direct a movie, right? You want to make an impression, and Christian really did here with his film.
I agree, and I think we all agree that he did a genuinely very, very good job making this film.
Yeah, it leaves an emotional impact.
I agree, absolutely. Yeah. That's the most important thing any film should really do, I think.
Sure.
Thank you, Toby, for joining me, and thank you, Diogo, for putting this show together. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a constructive environment where filmmakers can give each other feedback, and we want to foster that more and more, especially as we build the CenterFrame community. And we really want to get more of your films as well. If you want to hear from us, we definitely want to hear from you, and please send us more of your work. Also, make sure you sign up to our newsletter and to our social media to join the conversation. And thanks again, guys, for putting this show together. And I will see everyone in our next episode 4.